Laura Sullivan Green, Civil and Environmental Engineering Department Chair, and Pat Backer, Professor of Technology from San Jose State University, are here to share with us what they are learning from their First in the World grant project, a consortium project with Cal Poly Pomona and Cal State Los Angeles. They will share resources that they are using to transform gateway STEM courses at Hispanic-serving institutions.
Hi, good morning. So we're going to
everybody.
divide up the presentation, and we are going to do some activities. That's why you're sitting with cards. So, so we received the grant in the second round, and why we picked the institutions is because we're all Hispanic-serving institution and Asian-serving institutions.
And
So-
minority-serving institutions.
And yes. So that's the current head count from this fall. If you look, we are all Hispanic-serving institutions, but the demographics are quite different. As could be expected, in LA, they have 67% of their students are Latino, and we are, and Pomona is 43%. We're the smallest at only 28.3%. Our grant basics. So we're just going to do this, we're going to try to do this as fast as possible. So what we did is we decided to look at our DFW rates at San Jose State, and we identified originally 9, right? 8 courses that we wanted to do in the first 2 years. And so we identified 8 courses, and then we basically got faculty from each of the 8 courses at each of the 3 campuses to agree to do this flipped methodology. So that was the basis of our grant, is to look at the implementation of flipped. If you look at the figure on the bottom, we didn't flip them all in the same year. So we started year 1 with calculus and physics. Year 2 was circuits and computer science, which interesting is computer science on each campus is taught in different departments. And even on San Jose State, we have...
With different languages.
With different languages, yes. And even at San Jose State, we have computer science, intro to computer science in the computer science department and intro to computer science in the computer engineering department. They're in different colleges as well. And then year 3, we had physics 2, so that's this year. Statics and discrete math, that was last year, I'm sorry, last year. They're still working on it. So what we've done is they basically have the lead faculty develops the materials or gets the materials from the web. We are very open in how they develop their materials. And then they train other faculty, who take over the class generally. Next slide. Okay, so our model is based on a strong faculty learning community. So we have faculty learning communities on each campus, which are interdisciplinary. As well, we have cross-campus disciplinary faculty learning communities. So like all the physics instructors on the 3 campuses are in a disciplinary physics learning community. Calculus is in a calculus one, et cetera. So we do training both in person. So the first summer we put everyone came to campus, and our campus, and we had they did all come to our campus.
Yeah, but I get into that later.
You get into that later. So I won't say that right now. So our big thing at the end, which we're going to spend some time on, is we are doing a multi-semester calculus study on all 3 campuses to assess the effectiveness of the flipped classroom approach. Next slide. Okay, the goals of the grant. We have 4 goals: to implement the flipped classroom model, obviously, to evaluate the effectiveness, to strengthen the core. We have a problem on all 3 campuses of students not getting through the core classes, particularly the preparation for the major, and the repeating, kind of what we saw yesterday. We had a lot of repeating. And so that's one of the things we've been tackling as a campus to try to get students to persist. And then we want to really look at transformation. Unfortunately, we did a survey years ago. I did it in 2011, and we repeated it at the beginning of this grant. And a depressing amount of STEM faculty are still almost all using lecture only in their classes.
And they know that it's not good, but they do it anyway, is exactly what they reported. So we wanted to make sure that we focused on going past recognition of the benefit of doing some type of active learning, even if we didn't infuse them with flipped classroom, but to recognize activities and things that they could do and bring back to their classroom to pull away from lecturing. So the major grant milestones that we have been focusing on, as Pat started to talk about, but I stopped her, was the first thing that we focused on with this grant was bringing all of our core faculty and campus leads and faculty learning community coordinators together to make sure they knew each other face to face to facilitate them working collaboratively on this grant. So we brought everybody to San Jose State in the summer of 16 for a 2.5-day workshop. We were pretty much together all day, every day, and got to know each other, made sure that we were all on the same page with what we wanted to accomplish with this grant. Other key things that we have done was create a grant website. One of the big things with the Department of Ed is dissemination. Not only doing this work and creating these materials, but making sure that people have access to them. So we are actively populating our website. We started in year 2, and we are still working through that 2 years later to make sure all of the materials that we develop and the evaluation tools and assessment tools are available to anybody who wants to use them. The calculus study started last spring and is still actively going, and I'm happy to hear that all of the first-year First in the Worlds got no-cost extensions. I have a lot of money to spend, and I am excited that we should hopefully get that extension for next year to continue our work, particularly with some of the things like the retention study and that we don't have time to do very effectively for our year 4. The core implementation is now complete. Fall was the first semester that our third-year group implemented, and they're doing their second semester implementation this semester. So we have a lot of success with that and a lot of happy faculty in our core faculty. And we've done outreach workshops every year. The year 2 and year 3 workshops have all been focused on getting faculty on our 3 partner campuses involved. And now this year, we are really focusing on outreach. We are doing workshops on San Jose State's campus and Pomona and LA's campus later this spring. We are doing a student success symposium in April and inviting community colleges and other CSUs in our area, inviting their faculty and staff to come and participate in this symposium so they can learn about this flipped classroom and other things for student success and really get everybody involved. And we are just about to send out that faculty survey for the second time and hoping that, we move that needle a little bit. I have a faculty member who talks about rugby a lot. And it's about not really moving that scrum, but inching it over and getting it going in the right direction. And we're really interested to see if we've managed to do that with all of the work we've been doing. So this slide was prompted by some of the questions and things that were going on yesterday. So these are some of the challenges that we have had throughout our project. Not doing PR with the students. One of the things that I found shocking, but was reported many times, was that some of the students in the classes didn't know they were in a flipped classroom. And on one hand, I guess that's good because they had an expectation of doing active learning in the classroom. But on the other hand, how did they not notice a difference? Because we know that many classes are not done in some type of active learning based on our evaluation of everything that's going on campus. So that was a little unnerving for that one. And the other big one was they don't know why this is being forced on them. And so we've spent a lot of time talking with our instructors on how do they talk to the students? How do they justify this change? Because students want familiarity. Our students are, they work a lot, they have a lot of family obligations, so why do they have to do what appears to be more work outside the classroom in order to prepare to come into the classroom? And justifying that with them, bringing them along for the journey, along for the ride, as opposed to doing this to them. We have found that that is very effective in explaining why we're doing something different than what they're normally accustomed to. One of the things that we caution everybody that we train in our workshops is don't do too much too soon. You might get really excited about the flipped classroom, but don't get ahead of yourself. Pace yourself. Find flippable moments to start off, because you never know how your flipping is going to evolve. So don't do everything and then realize, oh, that doesn't quite work, and then have to do everything over again. So pace yourself. And then one of the other things that has come up a lot in the training side of this, not so much with the core faculty, but with the training, is thinking that this is going to fix the problems with the students. We still are going to have the issue with student motivation and student preparedness coming into class. Before, when they, had what you would consider lack of preparedness from their prerequisites, or, lack of interest in completing the readings or things before they come to class, this is not going to fix that. This is just a different tool that will hopefully motivate the students to be more prepared to come into the class. No, I got it.
Oh, that's what you're going.
Just need to moisten my mouth a little bit. So yesterday there was some conversation about the framework that we're using to justify and to work our training in that. So we're using the Community of Inquiry framework, and this is really focusing on 3 key factors for everybody involved. And we use this COI framework not only to encourage our faculty to use this in the classroom, but we practice what we preach. All of our workshop materials are in the flipped model. We ask the faculty who are coming to our workshops to do their homework before they come. They get readings, they get tutorials, they come to our workshops hopefully prepared. And then, of course, we always have those handful who said they were too busy. So we ask them, what got in your way? So put yourself in the mind of your students. If you had things that seemed more important at the time that made you come unprepared, your students are the same way. So we really try to get the faculty in the mind as a student, as a learner. But the first factor in this is social presence. We want everybody to come where they feel that they can express themselves, that they are comfortable in who they are and expressing that with the people around them. We want them to feel that in the workshops. We want our students to feel that in the classroom. The second one is cognitive presence. Faculty globally know, and we learn that in our study, we know that lecturing is not great. It's not the most effective way for students to learn, but it's the way we learned and it's the way we know, so we keep doing it anyway. Well, we want to move past that understanding phase and get them into the problem-solving phase. We're engineers up here, and this is a STEM grant that we work on, so we really try to get that into the framework of problem solving. We recognize the problem, we know what the problem is, how do we solve it? And then the third component is that teaching presence, where we recognize that curriculum or what we're doing is important, but also the environment that we're doing it in. We make sure that we focus on how we're setting it up for our students, and that means both the faculty in the workshops as well as the students in the classroom, how they feel, where they're at, but also how to direct what is going on in that classroom so that we're teaching what we know to be the right things for their education, the things we know we have to make sure we cover, and then getting them into that problem-solving mode. So here's our first activity. You're first.
Okay, you're going to you're on the table with yellow cards, and if you're not on the table, you can move to a table that has cards. So we're going to use the yellow cards for this activity. So the reason we want you on a table is we want to first kind of go into more depth with the community of inquiry framework. So we want you to use the cards, discuss the framework, and then come up with questions or comments, and then we're going to address them. So we're going to give you 5 minutes to talk about this in your group, and anyone can write a card. We're using the yellow cards, and they're going to pick them up because we have helpers.
And you're going to put us on the spot.
Yes.
I'm going to ask the question, or Pat's going to ask the questions, and I'm going to answer them. And then I get to put her on the spot later.
So the students are now collecting the cards, the yellow cards. And if we don't get to your question, we're going to answer about 5 questions because we want to continue, and we do have another set of cards, which means something else is coming up. So after they collect the cards, I'm going to ask them of Laura.
So we had some tables that had some immediate discussion and some tables that were a little more quiet and reserved. And Pat and I walked around and were trying to facilitate. So typical flipped classroom. Okay. So we can start with some of the questions we have while we finish collecting the cards.
So I'm going to start with the cards I have, and then I'll try to get to as many as I can in about 5 or 8 minutes, because then we do have another part of the presentation. So the first question, Laura.
Yeah.
How does active learning fit into the community of inquiry framework?
So active learning is all about interaction and exploring the material. So active learning, you need to interact with your peers around you. So making sure that you have a teaching environment, that's that teaching presence, that will encourage the learner, we'll say learner because it can be the faculty or the student in this case, to be comfortable, so have their social presence, so that their cognitive presence is stimulated. So they feel that they are moving past that understanding, them being able to repeat the material into really synthesizing the material and moving to problem solving.
Actually, I have a good follow-up for that.
All right.
Meaningful personal relationships, how do you do it? And let's answer that for students, since you just mentioned that.
All right, so students first?
Both, I didn't say. I'm
Okay.
adding students.
So, well, the faculty one I think is a little bit easier, so I'll answer that quick and then I'll move to the students. So the faculty, think about all of you in this room. You know some of the people around you, you don't know others. So getting the faculty to move past that, siloing themselves into their department, their college, something like that, into a comfort of, hey, that humanities person over there has the same challenges I have in engineering, getting into that framework and just being comfortable being yourself. And it's sort of the same for students, feeling comfortable being a little bit vulnerable, saying what you really think. So at the beginning of the class, we really encourage the faculty to start a little bit easy and get the students to do some icebreaker things with them, to talk about themselves, to find out that the students next to them have the same challenges that they have, so that if something comes up where their core belief is really challenged, if they believe that something is correct and they make that statement that, may be challenged by their peers next to them, that they feel comfortable being vulnerable with them. So it's really just finding common ground. So doing, simple icebreaker things, they may be kind of cheesy, but it does really work, getting them to feel that they have something in common with the person next to them.
Okay, so the next question is on cognitive, sorry, I lost my question. I was going to ask cognitive presence.
Yeah.
So where do teachers start when looking for ways to fix the problems with their classroom?
Fix the problems. That's kind of tough to unpack. Whoever asked that question, could I ask for some clarification on what problem you're trying to fix? Because it could be fix, incorrect assumptions. It could be, different. Yeah.
Well, just evaluating like the current status of your teaching methods, and then kind of going through the process of where are the issues that I'm having, where are they popping up?
Okay. So when you are acting as a facilitator in the classroom, so you'll notice the first thing that we did as soon as we gave you the activity, we started walking around and listening to the conversations that were going around. And when you do flipped classroom or active learning, that does not mean that you never do any type of lecturing in the classroom. So a lot of times when you walk around, you recognize right away where those incorrect beliefs or the incorrect understanding lies. And you can pull the group back and say, okay, hang on, I heard a number of students who seem to be stuck on this part or don't quite understand this. So let's do a mini lecture here and address that incorrect understanding and then let them go back to the activity. As the facilitator, that is your job, to go out and listen while it's happening. We could have just sat up here. I mean, I have a bum foot right now. I could have sat here and chatted with anybody who wanted to come up and see me, but instead I'm like, no, this is flipped classroom. I'm going out and I'm seeing what everybody is doing and saying. So that's really, as a facilitator, that's your job.
So this is the last question we can ask now, but I'm going to let you know that we're going to answer these questions, and we'll send our answers to these questions to you.
Yes.
But there's a lot of questions, so maybe not today. It depends how.
There's lots of
depends on
questions.
how long
That's great.
if our plan is delayed. The last question is, how do you scaffold these kinds of activities?
There are a lot of resources available. And flipped classroom is a lot less about the videos and the tutorials that you either identify or create to present the knowledge. Those activities in class are really the crux of the method, because you can just give homework and it gets kind of boring. The students sort of sit there, there's no discussion. So it's really finding different activities. But there's tons of things out there. I brought an example for Kristen. I don't know where Kristen popped over to. She does online classes. There was 102, I think, different ideas for there to do flipped classroom online. Different ways to do that. There's Barbie Honeycutt has 100 ways for non-tech ways to flip. So it's not about recreating the wheel. You don't have to think of these activities yourself. You go out and you read the materials out there or the materials that we've created and say, okay, that could work in my classroom. I can do a minute paper. I can do, this meming. That was one I didn't know about. It's meme my lecture. That if you have a good group of students, you can maybe trust them to do that. But yeah, so look out for resources. There's all kinds of suggestions, but that's also how the faculty learning community works. Okay, so
Faculty engagement.
I'm doing this part. So faculty engagement, one of the questions that came up yesterday was, how do you get faculty motivated? How do you create meaningful change that's going to hopefully exist after the grant money runs out? So we have these multidisciplinary faculty learning communities. One of the key things we wanted to do was connect faculty. Not only connect them with the people that are in their department, but the people who were flipping across campus, people who were on these other campuses. We're all CSUs, but we're all very different, but yet we're all teaching the same material. So we're finding that common ground there and engaging the faculty. We started small. We rolled all of these core classes in over 3 academic years. We're doing the same thing with the workshops. Every year, we're doing these workshops that faculty are invited to participate in. And then if they complete the workshop and the lesson plan that's part of it, then they are eligible to apply for mini grants that will seed money to help them develop part or all of a flipped classroom of their choosing. So we really are trying to create those relationships. And it's actually worked quite well. A wonderful example in my own department, I'm in civil engineering, is we split our mechanics classes between civil and mechanical engineering. So we have for those of you who are engineering people, we have our statics, our mechanics and materials, and our dynamics classes. They are collaborating. They're taking the statics videos that are created and using them as review, and they're tying their information in the mechanics and materials and the dynamics and saying, if you don't remember this part of here, here's where it ties back to your statics class. And they're all using the same online textbook and problem-solving platform. They are working together here. So our students over a 2 to 3 semester will have a similar experience in those 3 classes. And then the civil engineering students, they also get it in our first semester structural class, which comes after those classes. So this was a perfect example of planting that seed in statics and then watching it branch out. Did I hit everything? Yep. So then we'll skip over this part, but we've trained over 100 faculty and given over about 30 mini grants for faculty across the 3 campuses. So one of the things, this was the first semester, we have an external evaluator with WestEd, and they have collected some material and feedback from the workshop participants. And virtually every participant said that they found meaningful connection with the faculty that they were connected with at these workshops, and that they were planning on using at least some of the ideas and the resources that they were provided in their next semester class. So we did a really good job of practicing what we preach, that community of inquiry framework with that social aspect of it, creating a meaningful relationship in that workshop where we were making sure that they were not just sitting next to each other, that they were communicating and interacting that would lead them to feel like they were not alone in doing this.
In addition, I want to add to this, we do have a faculty learning coordinator on each campus, and they are the point of contact for the faculty, and so they continually interact with the faculty on the mini grants and the core faculty if they have questions for, pedagogy questions or facilitation or examples. So they've been really lucky with having these FLIC coordinators.
Yes. Okay. Next.
Okay, you can skip this. We already talked about it.
The big
Okay,
thing,
this
the
is mine.
calculus study.
Yes.
There was lots of interest in this when we were initially invited for
Okay,
this.
so we are in kind of the third part, the third out of 3 parts of our calculus impact study. And we generally, in most campuses, we have instructors teach 2 sections of calculus, and they are randomly assigned one section to be a flipped and one section to be traditional, however they taught it in the past.
Business as usual. If they used a little bit of activity before, they can still do that. But it's just their business as usual and then the flipped. And as part of the evaluation, they do they have logs, so that part of the WestEd evaluation is how true to the method is each classroom.
So one thing they found out is that faculty are more true to the flip in their second semester, because they've had more experience doing it. Well, this is the general model. So we basically did the workshops in fall 2017 with the faculty to flip in spring 2018. Now, this was complicated by the fact that the CSU system has mandated a switch from quarter systems to semester systems. So 2 of our 3 campuses were on the quarter system. LA switched earlier. Cal Poly didn't switch till fall 18. Yes. So Cal Poly is actually on a different timeline. So San Jose State and LA started their assessment and their their study of calculus in spring 18 and fall 18. Cal Poly started fall 18 and spring 19. So it has been a little, now. So that has been a little complication
One of those
this.
little perks you didn't realize when you wrote the grant.
We didn't really, well, when we wrote this grant, there was no plans to make it to force them to be a quarter system into a semester system. That happened, we work in a system and they write rules and all of a sudden you get them and you're like, oh my God, this is gonna screw up our study. So I want to give you some data. So in spring 18, we had 2 campuses. We had 20 classes, 10 flipped, 10 not flipped, taught by 12 instructors, 2 at San Jose State, 5 at LA. Sorry, this is the fall 18, and 5 at Cal Poly. So the fall data, we had 534 students altogether. We had post-test data for 470 students. They're still doing the analysis, but we expect at least 400 pre-test, post-tests. So we give them a pre-test, yes, the Mathematics Diagnostic Testing Project test.
MDTP.
And
this
then
had a real negative reaction on the campuses and the math departments. This was never intended as a placement test, but many campuses on the CSU were using it that way. And it had just been removed at that just before we started this study. So then we said, hey, guess what? We're bringing the MDTP back. And they flipped. And not in a good way. So we had to explain to them that no, this is not a placement. We are just using this as an evaluation of where the students start. It is, and we had to do a lot of PR with 2 of the 3 campuses on, no, we are not using it the way we just stopped using it.
So we give the pre-test sometime in the first 3 weeks. I'm actually reading from the manual we hand the instructors. And the post-test is in the last 3 weeks. The post-test, we do the calculus concepts inventory as the post-test, which was done, one of the groups who spoke yesterday talked about the same inventory. And actually, one of the posters I saw was talking about this yesterday. So if you just go to the next slide. Okay, so this is our spring post-test data. In the spring, flip was slightly higher, and in the fall, they were basically the same.
This is an aggregate of all of the campuses.
So our first research question, does using the flipped improve student outcomes? We are assessing not only outcomes in Calculus 1, we are following up with grades in subsequent courses. We just started collecting that information.
So
it requires me to pull like hundreds of transcripts, which I have to do, and I haven't done yet. I'm doing it during spring break. I think that's a good time. I could probably pull those transcripts.
In theory.
We can do them in batch. I just have to enter every student ID by one at a time. So we're expecting that's going to be a while. We're also looking at STEM retention. So our university, as all of CSU, looks at retention and the retention based on the student's first declared major. So if a student switches from mechanical engineering to art to business, it still counts against mechanical engineering's 4- and 6-year retention rate. So we are changing this for this grant into STEM retention. So if they stay in a STEM field, we count it as a win.
Which means we have to deal with each institutional research office on all 3 campuses to run special reports for us. They're not super happy with that.
So the question number 2 is, what factors moderate the effectiveness of the flip? So they found that 2 factors. One are readiness for calculus, students' readiness for calculus, the nature of the instructor, fidelity to the flip methods. And the last one I just put in there, it's not really an issue, it's something we found that from the data we've collected so far, so we've collected about data on 600 pairs, about, give or take. It appears that students who are very prepared do the same if it's flipped or not flipped, but students who are less prepared are doing better in the flipped. So we are going to do further analysis on that because we just had this discussion last week, right?
Yes.
Last week, the evaluator gave us this and said, by the way, this is an interesting thing we found, that if they're less prepared, they do better in the flip. So we're hoping that the less prepared will do better in Calculus 2, for example.
All of these results are just quick pictures. They're not statistically significant yet because we don't have enough data. That's the beauty of being able to do this multiple semesters with multiple sections and all of that good stuff. But this is just a quick snapshot. So we are still very heavy in the figuring out what all this means.
So we forgot to say what X and Y were.
We're not supposed to.
We're not supposed to.
We're
Okay.
not supposed to say which institution
Okay,
X is
so
and which Y is.
we block it. So one institution, if you notice, had a much lower pre-test, post-test than the other institution. But if I know our institutions, I know which one is which. So there are different demographics in preparedness. So they're now linking the preparedness to the students' post-test.
Yeah, none of that is in this data. This is just a quick, this is what they did at the beginning, this is what they did at the end, and we're not looking at preparedness or anything else.
Okay, it's your
Okay,
turn.
so question 2. So use the green card on your table, and since we are still in the midst of this study, we want you to tell us what questions do you wish we would ask in this study?
Because we can still ask them. We can still ask them.
Some of them we may be asking, we just didn't present here, but some of them we would love to hear what you think. What do you wish we would look at? What factor do you think that we should include in this evaluation? So talk amongst yourselves, think about it, and then write it on there, and then I will get to ask Pat this time what our response to that is.
So 5 minutes.
About 5 minutes. So one thing that I did hear while I was walking around was the little factoid that it really depends if lecturing, flipped classroom,
no,
whatever,
we're gonna collect the questions.
it's if you do it well. Students can perform better if you do whatever method you use well. And that is correct. And one of the comments that I made yesterday was that we discovered in this study that if with our faculty learning community support, as these faculty were learning flipped classroom last semester, this was the first time most of them had done it, they did no harm. The students in both of their classrooms they did not have that flipped classroom slump. So that is a big deal for this study.
Okay, we have time for like a couple questions.
So first question is, why were the pre-tests for the calculus study different from the post-test?
Well, the post-test implies they've taken calculus, and that's why we used a different pre-test. And actually, the evaluator picked this test. And also the fact that the pre-test was used on many CSUs as the calculus placement test. So it had already been normed and used for many, many years for thousands of students. So I think that's why the evaluator chose it. But you know what? When you give us these questions, I will ask the evaluator why she chose that test.
So the next question, have you compared the sections taught by the same instructors despite the What Works Clearinghouse standards?
By what?
Despite
Yes,
the WWC?
yes. Actually, that's the big issue, is that we had to do a randomized study to get the grant and also to have some effectiveness, because there's very few, most of the flipped classroom is based on someone flipping their entire classroom and collecting data. So it was very important to the Department of Ed when when Laura met with the assessment team from What Works at the meetings, that we had a randomized control study, which I realize has ethical implications and is, problematic in many ways. But we actually prefer an instructor being their own control. because then you get rid of the bias for instructor bias, because some instructors, have different grades than others. Some are harder, some are easier, some, that's just the way of life. So if the evaluator really liked having, at San Jose State at least, I think every person teaching taught 2 sections. But we're going to do further work and feedback on them.
What happens to students in the next class in the math sequence?
That's what we'll know. So we'll know that after spring break, because that's when I'm probably going to try to pull it. But we are putting together this big student success symposium in April, and I'm kind of panicked about that as well. I'm also the project director for our Strengthening Institutions grant, Project Succeed, which is focused on improving the retention and graduation rate of all freshmen at San Jose State, not just STEM freshmen. So, it's kind of linked together, but not directly. Okay, one more.
Okay, so here, do you have any measures of student perceptions of the learning climate? Short answer, yes.
Yes, I'm
The
looking at
students
seeing
do,
if it's in this
feedback too.
evaluation report. Yes, actually, I didn't put this in here, but if the person is interested who asked that question, I can give you the report, because they actually have a whole section of through the student's eyes, where they did based on the evaluation, which I thought was going to take too much time to discuss, so we didn't include it in the slides, because we wanted to have an active presentation, so we had to cut some things. So whoever asked that question, I can give you this, because I have it digitally.
No, you can't. That's an internal report.
Oh, I can't give you this,
Yes.
but I can take
But
part of
we will
it.
take these questions
I can
and
take these
provide
questions and make
responses
it-
and give it to Jenny for you to, we will follow up on all of these questions as best we can.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your attention and your participation. We appreciate it.
Okay, so do we have a minute or two for general questions? Do we have a minute or two for general questions, or no? No. Okay, sorry. Find us. We're going to be hanging around, so.
Take your mic off.
All right. Bye.